Okay, guys. Today, what I am teaching you is radical equations. So 11.3 is radical equations. And what I hope that you should be able to say that you can do by the end of this is I can solve radical equations. And also, this is going to be kind of a fancy word. I'm just going to clone this. You're also going to be able to say that I can solve radical equations with extraneous solutions. Probably a word in math that you may not have come across, but you're certainly going to learn what it is later. All right, so we're going to start off, and I'm going to give you, they give this example in the book, and I'm just going to read it directly to you. Free fall height is the title of this. Two objects are dropped simultaneously. The first object reaches the ground in 2.5 seconds, and the second object reaches the ground in 1.5 seconds later. From what heights were the two objects dropped? Okay, and they actually give us an equation. So it's going to be time equals the square root of the height divided by 4. Okay, and in this case, we're just going to substitute in our stuff from the equation. So our time, it's 2.5 seconds. Okay, so I've got, 2.5 seconds. I'm going to enter into the equation equals the height divided by 4. So we have to solve this problem. Well, solving a problem like this is just like solving any other equation, except for when we get to the radical. So let's get everything by itself except for the radical. So if I have if I'm going to solve for h here, I've got this 4 in the denominator. Well, if I'm dividing by 4, I can simply multiply both sides by 4. Okay. And those will cancel each other out. And I'm left with 2.5 times 4 is 10 equals the square root of h. Well, you're asking yourself, what times itself equals 10? So if we have the square root, to get rid of the square root, we can simply square both sides of the equation. That means h equals 100. That means this was dropped from 100 feet. Okay, so that's the problem. Now we're going to look at one more that's just like that. An object is dropped from an unknown height and reaches the ground in 5 seconds. From what height is it dropped? Okay, so we're going to take this and we're going to do, again, t equals the square root of h divided by 4. And at this time, we know that it was dropped from 5 seconds. So we're going to put 5 equals the square root of h divided by 4. So I want you to take a moment at home and press pause, and you can solve this equation. Okay, so hopefully you remember that we're going to multiply by the denominator. Just like any other time we're going to solve for h, we want to get h by itself. So if we multiply by the denominator here, we're going to have 20 equals the square root of h. So we multiply both sides of the equation by 4, and we get the square root of h. To get rid of the square root, we simply square both sides. So if we square that side and we square that side, this h, the square root of h times the square root of h is just simply h. So h equals, and 20 squared is 20 times 20 is 400. The height was that it was dropped at 400 feet. Okay, So now the next part of this is I want to tell you something. I wanted to make sure that you understood, or that I know that you watched this. So tomorrow morning I'm going to ask you to tell me the secret code. And if you remember in the movie, the Christmas Story, this might be familiar. But anyway, the first word in our secret code is B. Okay, so now we're going to look at our next question, and that is solve the square root of x minus 3 plus 8 equals 15. Okay, so this is, again, just like solving any equation. Okay, we want to eventually get x on its own. So to get x on its own, I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides of the equation. Okay, and then we're going to do 15 minus 8. And what's that? 7. And then we've got the square root of x minus 3 equals 7. So what do we do when we have the square root of x minus 3 equals 7? If we have a square root and we want to get rid of it, we're going to square both sides. So both sides of the equation. So if I square this side and I square this side, we're going to have x minus 3, because x, anything times itself, or the square root, anything times itself is just itself, equals 49. And I could easily show you why this is. If I do x minus 3 times x minus 3, x times x is x squared, negative 3x. That would be the best explanation on this one. I'm not going to explain it that way, sorry. Anyway, I know if I take that square root, just like if I took the square root of 7 times the square root of 7, that's a better way to explain it, I know that that is the square root of 49, and the square root of 49 is just 7. So anything, when you square it, it is, you just take the square root off of it, okay? So now all I have to do is add 3 to both sides of the equation, and I've got x equals 52. Yay! So our second, here we go back into our secret code. Our second code is sure. So we've got B, sure. All right. Okay, so our next problem is 6 minus the square root of 2y equals negative 2. So we're going to go ahead and solve this problem. We want to get the y by itself, so I'm going to start by subtracting 6 here. So I've got negative square root of 2y equals negative 8. Pause just for 1 second here. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, I'm going to square both sides then to get rid of the square root. So I'm going to square this side, and I'm going to square this side. And that equals a negative, the square root of this times itself is going to be just 2y, because the negative times the negative is a positive. And then negative 8 squared is 64. So I divide by 2. Then, and I've got y equals 64. Oh, excuse me, 32. Okay, so you'll get to practice some of those on your homework tomorrow. But we go to our next secret word is 2. So be sure to. And that leads us to our next set of problems. Now we're coming into our last set of examples, and I'm actually going to give you a problem where there is variables on each side of the equation, and that's going to be 2 minus y, 2 minus y, the square root of 2 minus y equals y. So 2 minus y, the square root of 2 minus y equals y. And I have to look at this, and I look right away, I was like, I can't solve this because I've got 2y, so I'm going to take this and I have to square both sides to get rid of this square root. So that's going to be 2 minus y equals y squared. And right now I can't solve it like that, so I'm going to have to simply put this and make it equal to 0. So just like, and you've seen these problems before. So I will add y and subtract 2 from both sides of the equation. So I also have to subtract 2 and add y to this side of the equation. I'm left with 0 equals y squared plus y minus 2. Now, you may or may not remember, you could go through the whole quadratic formula, but this is one you can simply factor just by looking at it. In this case, we're multiplying to -2 and adding to 1. So I'm going to say y plus 2 times y minus 1, and that all equals 0. So if we set this equal to 0, we know that y plus 2 equals 0, or y minus 1 equals 0, and we solve. So if we subtract 2, y equals -2, and if we add 1, y equals 1. So my solution set is -2 and 1. This is the last objective. Remember I said way back here is that we were going to learn how to solve radical equations, and you've already learned how to do that. But now we're going to solve radical equations with extraneous solutions. When we're talking about extraneous solutions, we're talking about when we have to factor, we've got the squared in there. So it kind of looks like a quadratic equation. But what we have to do with our solutions is we have to check our answer. We have to check this in the original equation. So we have to put -2 and 1 in the original equation. So our original equation was the square root of 2 minus y equals y. So I'm going to do two different things here. I got to put -2 into the equation. So square root of 2 minus 2 equals -2. Well, the square root 2 minus 2 is 0. Square root of 0 equals -2. Well, the square root of 0 is 0 equals -2. This solution does not work. -2 is not one of our solutions. Now we got to check and see if 1 works and see if it is true. So we do 2 minus 1 equals 1. 2 minus 1 is 1 equals 1. So the square root of 1, well, 1 times 1 is 1. So 1 in this case equals 1. 1 is a check mark. So our solution is y equals 1 in this case. Okay, so now we get our next secret code. Be sure to drink. All right, so you can write that one down. For all you fun fans at home watching this, you will be able to learn the secret code. Be super excited afterwards. All right, so one more problem we have. Oh, geez. What is that problem again? It is y equals the square root of y plus 6. Try it out at home. Okay, now that you've resumed the recording, if you remember from the last problem, we need to start by getting rid of the square root. So we square each side, and I've got y equals, I've got y plus 6 times, y squared equals y plus 6. Okay, I'm just going to subtract the y, and subtract the 6. So I'm going to have y squared equals negative y, not y squared, y minus y, y squared minus y minus 6 equals 0. So I subtract the y over here and subtract the 6. Sorry. All right, so I've got to multiply to -6 and add to -1. So that is, what's that, -6. No, that's 3 and 2. So 3, -3, and +2. Y minus 3, y plus 2 equals 0. I'm not going to go through the whole thing of solving this, but we know that y equals 3 and y equals -2. Again, we've got to check our solution. We've got to check if the 3 works, and we have to check if the -2 works. So 3 equals the square root of 3 plus 6. 3 plus 6 is 9. The square root of 9 equals 3. Yes, it works. Let's try -2. -2 equals the square root of -2 plus 6. That equals 4 equals -2. Well, the square root of 4 does not equal -2. It equals 2. So -2 does not work. Alrighty. One more clue for you. Your. It's the second to last clue. Your is your second to last clue. And with that, I am finished with today's lesson. We will practice some more, but just remember, it's just like solving equations, except for you have to square this to get rid of the square root. And I hope you have a good evening, and I've almost stayed under my 15 minutes. Sorry about that. But I do have to give you your last clue. Ovaltine. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to drink your Ovaltine. And for anyone who's watched Christmas Story, that's what Ralphie figured out when he got his secret super decoder ring. He was quite upset. Anyway, good night.